Hello, everyone. It is Jenny and Laurie again of Astropath. Now, before we dive into our topic about transits today, let's just introduce ourselves in case you don't know us by now. Jenny is of Hidden Path Astrology. You can find her at hiddenpathastrology.com. You can find me at astrolore.org. And you can find both of us on social media, places like that. Go ahead and find us. And here on YouTube, please like us and comment. Let us know how you like these videos. And what we're really trying to do right now is really help people understand transits. And this is the fourth of our videos on transits. Is that right, Jenny? The fourth one?
Yeah, that's right. This is part 4.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Anything else about just intro that we need to talk about?
No, let's dive into our transit videos. So just so you know, we've done 3 others of these. We did planetary ingresses, we did timing techniques, and we did speed of the planets. So you can find all those on YouTube. So this is number 4, and we're going to focus on sign and house changes today. So how every time a planet changes sign, how that impacts you based on the zodiac sign, but also based on the astrological house that that planet goes in. So we're going to do a kind of a quick overview of the zodiac, the signs, but also of houses and planets. Just a very brief overview so you just have an understanding. But that's what we're covering today. So again, the topic is sign and house changes. And I guess the other thing we have to add, Laurie, is that we use whole sign houses. So that means in the system that we use, each sign equals an entire house in your natal chart. And you'll see more about what the heck that might mean as we open up our example charts.
Right.
Are you doing cat management?
No, I realized my microphone, I don't know if anybody could hear me at all. My microphone was off somewhere.
No, I think I could certainly hear you. So hopefully
Okay.
that's the
Good.
true thing here.
Good.
Anyway, so let's hop into Laurie. What do we mean by sign and house changes in transits? What does that mean?
Well, the planets are just going around, from the moment you're born, you've got this one chart that represents that moment that you're born. And then from that moment onward, the planets keep moving. And as they change signs, when you're looking at your own chart, when a planet changes sign, it is also changing house in your chart because we're using whole sign house system. And that makes it easy to kind of watch how these planets move from house to house, from sign to sign. So, when a planet enters a new sign, it takes on a whole new outfit. You can think of it that way. It takes on a whole new feeling, a whole new sense of how it functions. And using whole sign, it also changes where in your life you are going to experience that change.
Yeah, nicely said. Yeah, so I guess the first part is just to understand, excuse my voice here, still there's a lot of pollen in the air. But anyway, the first part is really to understand that is a little bit about the zodiac wheel. So every single time a planet goes from one sign to the next sign, it's a dramatic change. And the reason why it's a dramatic change is because by definition, the signs that sit next to each other are completely different in all ways that astrologers look at the signs. So in other words, when we went from Taurus season, which is just where we happen to be, into Gemini season, the difference between Taurus and Gemini is huge. I mean, Taurus is a fixed earth sign, and it has a yin orientation, a very inward orientation, versus Gemini, which is completely the opposite. It's a yang sign. It's very extroverted. It's air, and it's mutable. So very, very different. And every single sign in the zodiac is like that, completely different than the one before it. And in a way, each sign kind of emerges as a response to the one before it. So it's kind of like, hey, what's kind of gotten out of balance? Oh, let's switch, So like in Taurus season, it's like very stable and slow and, this very fixed earth sign. And then when you move into Gemini, it picks up speed, it's got wings, it's air, it's light, it's fast, it's changeable. So it sort of lifts us all out of that Taurus. So and every single sign is like that.
And then after Gemini, where's it go then?
It goes back into another yin sign, but now we're in Cancer. So Cancer is a water sign, and it's also cardinal. So cardinal's responsible for starting things, and it always initiates a whole brand new season wherever you live. So it's totally different. It goes back into that yin, inward, like let's nourish ourselves after that dry, flappy Gemini energy. So, and the whole zodiac kind of does that. It's like a wave motion from inward to outward, the entire cycle. So it's pretty cool. I
Yeah.
really love how it works like that.
Yeah,
So,
it really
yeah.
is. It's yeah, each sign is a different modality, a different element, a different polarity. No, what's the word I'm looking for? For the
I
yin
usually
and
use
yang.
orientation, but
The
yeah,
orientation,
yeah.
that's right. Yeah,
Mhm.
so it's a different orientation, it's a different element, it's a different modality. It's yeah, it really does go in that wave pattern. It's pretty
Mhm.
fascinating to watch that.
Yeah. It's almost like if you think about a relay race and the
Mm,
runner's coming up and they have the baton and then they hand that baton off to the next character who's running, but they don't ever look at each other, right? So like the sign in front kind of reaches back, grabs that baton and keeps running. So you can kind of think of that. They never look at each other, those two signs, because they're so different. They don't have a lot of common ground, yet they're passing the baton. So it's a really interesting way of thinking about this movement of the zodiac wheel, which I really love.
I remember in my really early studies reading, and it somehow stuck with me that, and it was very much based probably on sun sign, but it talked about the sign ahead of you always has so much to teach you. And
Hmm.
that's kind of I always took that to heart in some way. As
Hmm.
a Leo, I always felt like, oh, well, Virgo has a lot to teach me. Yeah, to friggin' slow down a little and, calm down a
Yeah.
little. But yeah, it's part of that wave. We do have a
Yeah.
lot to learn from the next sign
Yeah.
because it kind of
So
pulls us forward.
yeah, it does. It's interesting. It's almost like a different goal or something. But what for each of you who are watching this video, you can think of that dramatic change. It happens in your natal chart. So you have a snapshot, whatever your natal chart is, and that sign, wherever you don't know exactly necessarily what sign sits in what's house unless you open up that chart and you know what it is. But my point is just that all of us contend with that energy switch. It just comes about in different places. So that's how the sign impacts each of you individually, is like there's an energy switch. That's the simplest way I can put it. Do you have another?
Yeah. No, that's perfect. I think
Okay.
that's perfect. That's simple. The planets move from one sign to the next. And we talked in one of our previous videos about the speed of the planets. And that is so very important because some planets zip around the chart really quickly, like the moon in 28 days. We get that moodiness of the sun moving from one sign to the next, and then the other planets at various speeds and amount of time they spend in each area.
Yeah. Okay. Well, should we talk about the houses? Should we open up?
So let's open up the chart because I
Yeah, I think
think
it's easier.
that makes it
Yeah.
easier to think about. And I've got a chart here. What we're looking at here, just to direct your eye, what we're looking at is we're using an example of someone with a Scorpio rising. So we've got the symbol of Scorpio. Let me get my annotation tool here. We've got the sign of Scorpio here on the ascendant. Now, when you're looking at your chart, you might have Scorpio rising, but chances are you very well might not. But this is the example that we're using. So this inside chart, that I took out all the planets to keep things very simple. So what we are looking at is simply this outer ring where the planets are in current time. Does that make sense, Jenny? Is that clear how I said that?
Yes. Yes. I think that's great.
Okay, so as the planets move, and we talked about this in a previous video as well, but just to remind you, the planets are moving counterclockwise. They are moving in this direction through your chart. They're transiting in this direction. Okay, so just so that's clear.
Yeah, and you can see that by the zodiac wheel, the zodiac order. It always goes Scorpio to Sagittarius to Capricorn and so on. It's always going to be in that order
Yes.
in terms of the wheel itself. Yeah, and then the second part for, so then if you turn your attention right into that inner ring where you see the numbers 1 through 12, so that's the house system. And what you want to get from this video is that every single time a planet changes sign, because we're using whole sign houses, it's going to change house. So that means it's going to come into a different topic of your life, because all 12 houses represent a different area of your life. So I love the houses because it's kind of like where the rubber meets the road. Like, this is where you understand, like, where in your life are these events taking place? Where are you being impacted? Where is the energy changing? And each of us is born with a natal chart. So this Scorpio rising person, they're always going to have Scorpio in the first house. They're always going to have a Sagittarius in the second house, and so on. And that's the same with you. So, there isn't, necessity to understand how those two work together in your own chart. That's a bigger topic. And that's why you should come and have a consultation with one of the two of us.
Yeah.
So we don't want to get super crazy with that. But what we do want you to know from today is, what are those 12 topics in a nutshell, of the houses?
Yeah.
So what the heck are they, Laurie?
What the heck are they? I mean, we can go through this really quickly. I would
let's do it.
assume that everyone who's watching this probably has a fair understanding of this. But just for the purposes of kind of giving you a snapshot of this, the first house is about the self. Pure and simple. It is your personality, how you show up in the world. What about the second house, Jennie?
Second house is your finances, your self-worth, your values in a nutshell. Yep.
Third house would be your communication styles, your day-to-day ramblings through your life. You go to the grocery store, just the day-to-day activities of life. It also, communications, siblings, neighbors, that kind of thing are in that area.
Yeah, and then when we get to the fourth house, another angular house, so quite a powerful house, we're looking at your roots, house, home, family, like all those things that you think of when you think of home. It can go as far back as your lineage, your ancestors. It can be your relationship with the actual land you live on. And it also can be your inner sort of integration of your personality, your own roots of your personality.
Yeah. Okay. And then the fifth house is really your creativity, how you give love into the world, how you give of yourself. That can involve things like children, love affairs, and really anything creative that anything that you create to give of yourself to the world. That's what the fifth house is.
Lovely. And then when you get to the sixth house, we're talking a little bit more like habits, routines, practices. Can be things that, like, how you get yourself to work. Do you pack your lunch? Those kind of nuts and bolts of your daily life, and also can refer to colleagues. It can even refer to like healthcare practitioners, like how you do your self-care.
Yeah. Back in the day, it was slaves.
Yeah. Or it also can be employees.
And servants and stuff like that. But it can be employees.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So you go back into the roots of astrology, and some of the most, shocking things can show up here. At any rate, seventh house is about our, intimate partners or work partners, kind of equal partnerships. It's often thought of as, marriage and spouse and that kind of thing, but it's also work related partnerships.
Nice. Yeah, and then when you get to the eighth house, it's always kind of an interesting one, because the eighth house, in a way, is like a deeper layer of the seventh house, where now you're bumping into all each other's emotional baggage and the stuff that you've forgotten about, or the stuff you try to sweep under the rug, that really crops back up. So that eighth house really talks about other people's values, other people's money, other people's emotional baggage. And a lot of it is about, figuring out your boundaries, using rituals to learn how to set boundaries, to figure out where you end and other people start. So there's a really a big push to know yourself in the eighth house. So Yeah.
The ninth house is very much your worldview and how you develop your worldviews through education, through travel, through expanding your understanding of other cultures. So that, yeah, that ninth house is worldview.
Oh, yeah. Great. And the 10th house really refers to your profession, your social reputation, how you show up in public. So even if you're like, I don't know that I have exactly a profession, doesn't matter. It's high noon of the chart. So it's really where you show up. It also can have some connection to our parents, to authority figures, all of those things, and your achievements, social achievements.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then the 11th house is how you receive from the larger world. The 11th house is thought of a lot as community, the like-minded people that support you to your desires. It's where you receive from the outer world.
Lovely. And then we come to the mysterious 12th house, which is kind of it's the end of the cycle. So there's a feeling of dissolution here. The closings, it can refer to your subconscious patterns that you're not really aware of, that you're learning about. It can refer to isolation, retreats, the unseen, all of these kind of hidden, tucked away things that just kind of are, yeah, I mean, just behind the scenes, not always the easiest one to understand. Can also relate to your spirituality, like how you deal with the unknowable kind of bigger picture things of life.
And
So
I never think of the 12th house anymore without thinking of our friend Mary Jo talking about it as an opening in the back of your head where unknown and mysterious information can flow into you.
yeah,
I love
oh,
that idea. The 12th
yeah.
house in in some of the early texts that I read, the early books that I read, the 12th house was so demonized. And I think the
Mm,
12th house is it's a really beautiful space where we really can understand deep levels of
mhm.
humanity.
Yeah, when you said it's like that stuff, how you get those things that just pop in your mind, and this insight, and it's wise, and you're like, where did that come from? That's the 12th house.
Yes.
So yeah, love it.
So there's a
Yeah.
quick primer on the houses. And now, if we think about these planets moving from one to another, that's where they bring their energy. So for this person with Scorpio rising, you know, one of the ways when early in my days of teaching, like group classes at my kitchen table, I would always really encourage people to just watch the sun. As a way to really learn how to work with transits, just look at the sun. We all know when the sun moves from one sign to another, right? Everybody talks about it. Oh, the sun's entering, Cancer next week or whatever it is. So if you just watch the sun, it spends approximately a month, 28 days, moving through each sign. And it's so consistent year after year. So this person with Scorpio rising, always this time of year when the sun is in Gemini, that sun is shining in their eighth house.
Mm,
So wherever the sun moves, it brings light, it brings warmth, it brings awareness. So
mm,
each year at this time of year, if you have Scorpio rising, your attention, that warmth and light, is around how you are navigating other people's boundaries in a curious way, because it's in Gemini. So there's a curiosity that you bring to that area. And when the sun is in there, it's really shining your attention on, I don't know, boundaries you need to set or how you're navigating other people's stuff. Eighth house.
yeah. Or even like studies of the occult could be another thing that happens in this month for
Yeah.
our victim here that we're displaying, our example. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting just to think about those topics, but I guess just as a quick understanding, so I mean the moon is going to move very, very quickly. It changes sign every 2.5 days. We're going to do a different one on how full moons, eclipses, those kinds of things might land in your chart. But basically speaking, it's going to be very quick. It's just going to be a couple of days, but you can still think of like, hey, what topics are being brought up in those pair of days, for yourself. It's worthwhile. So for, Mr. Freud here, it's fourth house topic, something about family and home are happening in those 2 days, that this moon is transiting, or 2 to 3 days. So
Yeah, and some people are going to be a lot more sensitive to that movement of the moon than others. Who would be more sensitive to that, Jenny?
well, off the top of my head, somebody with a night chart who is already more attuned to the moon would be one thing, or somebody who's got a very sensitive planet. They might also have their own natal moon, in their fourth house, because these planets that are on this chart, just to be clear, are transiting planets. This is
Right.
not the natal chart. So
Yeah. Yep, the natal chart is empty.
yeah.
Even though we have the date and time of birth over here, and this is if we put the planets in, it would be Freud's chart. But what I was thinking also is people who have Cancer rising are usually very, very sensitive to that quick movement of the planets and really get that mood shift every
Yeah,
few days as the moon moves.
interesting to think about.
Yeah.
So I guess quickly with the planets, Mercury is also going to move quickly, but Mercury's going to bring your thinking processes, like how you learn, your communication is going to be influenced by Mercury going through whichever house. So for
Right.
Freud, it's going to be his seventh house of relationships.
Right. So right now over this, and Mercury is moving very quickly as we're making this video, but Mercury in general, unless it's doing a retrograde, is going to move very quickly from house to house, maybe 3 weeks in a house, something like that. So it moves very quickly, and you can think about it. It brings its attention, and you might find yourself having more conversations about that area of your life while Mercury is moving through that area. So, if Mercury is moving through your fourth house, you might be thinking more about your family. If it's moving through your 10th house, your attention, your intellectual attention is more on your career, but you also have to layer in the sign that it's in.
Yeah, and then when Mercury goes into Gemini, which is going to happen just in a few short days, based on when we're making this video, the topic will switch for Mr. Freud. Suddenly his thinking is going to follow along with that sun in Gemini. It's going to be even more of an intensification of focus in that eighth house in that time frame. So that's what you want to think about. Like, okay, there's been topics of relationship, blah, blah, blah. Oop, now it's going into the eighth house, and suddenly his attention is brought into those deeper topics as well.
Right. He's been thinking about his relationship, and now he's thinking about how there's kind of these deeper levels of it that he has to deal with.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you always, in this moment that we are making this video, which is on June 7th, 2023, at this moment, Mercury, the Sun, and Venus are all in very different signs, which is, it's not like it's uncommon, but generally these planets are never very far apart. And if you look at your chart, in most of our charts, those 3 planets are pretty close together. And oftentimes they're all in the same sign or in 2 signs. This is kind of quite a spread here for these 3 planets right now.
Yes. And we will do some videos on the retrograde cycles so that you have a greater understanding of when because that's very important and not for this video. So
right. Yeah. We could easily
Yeah.
spin into that, especially
Yeah.
because we are facing a Venus retrograde coming up relatively soon, which we will be making a video about.
Yeah.
Each of these planets. So the sun brings the warmth, the moon, like you mentioned, the moon just brings moodiness from one area to another, or just that emotional attention. The sun brings the warmth and the generosity. The Mercury is bringing your intellectual attention to a particular area. What does Venus bring, Jenny?
Venus brings the attention more into your values. It can be issues of relationships, like your values in relationships. It can be issues of finances. Those are sort of the hot topics of Venus. An appreciation of beauty. It's also the idea of togetherness, as opposed to its opposite, Mars. But so Venus is this really, it's one of the benefics. So it's bringing in this like light of togetherness, whatever area of the chart you're talking about.
Right. So with this chart, with someone with Scorpio rising, your values, you're really thinking about what values you bring to your career, or how much money you're making in your career or not. Or, or you're thinking about creating more beauty in your career or in the outer world. Now, if this Venus was falling in a different house, let's say, yeah, whatever, if it was falling in the 8th house for you, it's going to be bringing your values into that deeper area of how you're navigating other people's boundaries. So wherever it's moving and whatever sign it's moving in, it's bringing the shade of the sign into the area of life of the
Yeah.
house.
And this one is like the code, kind of the most recent code switch, where we were in Cancer and now it's in Leo. So just as an example, we all have experienced that switch recently. So think about that in your own life. And then we move on to Mars. I mean, Mars is the action, right? Like Mars is usually very noticeable when it enters a new house because it's kind of a loud planet. It brings in a lot of action. It brings in like a let's do this now. It doesn't sit around, Mars as a counterpart to Venus is the principle of independence, and that need for separation in relationships. So, you're trying to bring Venus and Mars in balance in relationship. But wherever Mars moves into your chart, you're going to feel it. I mean, I usually do. It's pretty instantaneous. So,
Yeah, Mars, and of course, Mars moving, like right now, as we're making this video, Mars is in Leo, and Mars is pretty happy in Leo. It's got a lot of energy there. It's going to get things done. It's going to push you forward in that area of your life. Now, if it was moving through Pisces, it would be different, right?
yeah, very
Yeah,
different tone.
yeah.
So and for now, just thinking about, wherever you have Leo in your chart and where, Mars is impacting it. So where do you feel an impetus for action?
Right.
That's
Right. Yeah, Mars is a really fun one to watch because it's not it's not as quick as, Mercury and the sun and Venus move so quickly. Mars moves a little bit slower. It gives us a little bit more time to kind of dig in and get done whatever's required in that area of our lives. So, if you're looking at your own chart and you're seeing that Mars is getting ready to move into your first house, you know that it's a time of taking action, direct action in your life. So pay attention to that one. I love Mars's movement. It's a very, very great one to just watch
yeah.
how that goes. And yeah. Okay. And then after that, we move to Jupiter. And Jupiter is quite a bit slower. Mars, let's say as a real simple generalization, the Sun, Mercury, and Venus are approximately a 1-year cycle. Mars is approximately a 2-year cycle. Jupiter, all of a sudden, we jump to a 12-year cycle. So instead of just spending a couple of weeks or a couple of months in a sign, Jupiter spends approximately a year in each sign. So its movement is very noticeable as well because Jupiter's job is to make things bigger. It expands our awareness and understanding in this area.
Yeah, and if you think about the transition that Jupiter's made not all that long ago, and it's made a transition from Aries into Taurus. So it's very different. And the big takeaway for Jupiter is whatever it does, it magnifies. So whatever the issues are, so it can be really great things that can concentrate on really great things, but it also can exaggerate issues that you're struggling with. So I mean, generally speaking, it's considered a nice touch, like, oh, good, Jupiter's going here. But don't forget, like, we're human beings and we're complicated. So it's also going to highlight the things that maybe don't work so well in that area. And, and that's okay. That's just part of the process. But think about that, like what that transition felt like a few weeks ago. Whoever's watching this video, this is sometime in like late May of 2023.
Yeah.
So just think back to that time and think about what that switch is.
Yeah, what expanded in
Yeah,
the
what
house
expanded.
that moved into. So,
Yeah.
for people with Scorpio rising, it's an expansion of your relationship. And yeah, like you said, Jenny, that can be an expansion into something wonderful, or it could expand a problem. You could all of a sudden really have a new awareness of a problem that you didn't realize was there. Or, depending on where that planet is. For me, Jupiter moved into the 9th house, and it's expanding my understanding of my worldview and my place in it.
Mhm.
So yeah, and that actually coincided with a very interesting shift in my life that I'm sure I'll be talking about more as time goes by.
Yeah. Yes, you will.
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Um,
that Jupiter, yeah, look, and I really appreciate that you brought up the fact that it can exacerbate difficult things as well.
mhm,
People tend to think, like you said, people tend to think, oh, Jupiter's the great benefic, brings great benefits. Oh, it can, but it can also expand our tendencies to overindulge. That's
mhm,
something that I really think is important for people to understand. The when I see people in big Jupiter transits, depending on the chart and where it is, you might want to leave your checkbook at home or your credit cards at home, or not
yeah.
overindulge at the dessert buffet or whatever it might be.
Mm. Yeah. And then, after Jupiter, we kind of move into the much slower planets because from here, Saturn takes 30 years, roughly 29 years to go around your chart. So Saturn is going to occupy a particular place in your chart for a number of years, 2 to 3 to 4 years, depending exactly what's going on with retrogrades and so on. But basically, this is more like a settle in. Whenever Saturn changes sign, which it did not long ago, it settled into Pisces. We are settling into for long-term lessons.
Mhm.
These are building blocks. I think of Saturn as being sort of foundational. Saturn kind of comes in and says, hey, what building blocks do we need to set here? What stuff is extraneous that isn't useful, and that's going to get chucked out. That process can be quite painful and difficult with Saturn, but it is for the purpose of your learning. I very much think of Saturn as the teacher planet, and it's specifically teaching about responsibility and maturity and discipline. And and right now with Saturn and Pisces, we have a whole video on it, so check it out. My keyword is empathy. We're all learning how to develop empathy, and
Yeah.
it's in a very polarized world. So these are the long, slow, wherever Saturn's going, it's like, hey, where do you need to learn? How can you mature? How can you shed a skin to mature into the next iteration of you?
Yeah, I think I would really encourage anybody that's getting anything out of this video, and if you're still watching us, you probably are, do go back and listen to the video about Saturn's movement into Pisces, because that we did a good deep dive into that, and it's such an important thing to think about. Yeah, Saturn, when we're young, transits of Saturn can be very, very difficult because we don't necessarily want to take responsibility or grow up. And that is the job of Saturn, is to teach us, exactly like you said, Jenny, teach us responsibility, facing reality in a certain area of our life. So for this person with Scorpio rising, they really need to face reality and be responsible around how they are giving of themselves, how they are showing up with love and creativity in the world. If for you, you have a different rising sign, and that Saturn is, well, for me, it's in my seventh house. So it's really about facing the reality of my relationship dynamics and taking responsibility for creating what I want there. And yeah, watch the Pisces video, the Saturn into Pisces video, because I feel myself wanting to go right back into that conversation because it's so important. So
Yeah.
do watch that video. But yeah, wherever Saturn is, face reality, be accountable, take responsibility, learn, and be ready and willing to mature. Saturn is a great gift as it teaches us these things. We might not think so when we're super young, but
Yeah, I can speak. I feel like Saturn is always difficult transits for me, and as you can look at my chart and kind of understand why. But so it's just interesting. It's always like, okay, where do I need to step in here?
I
Uh,
love Saturn
so
transits. They're my favorite.
Speak for yourself. But once you get outside of Saturn, we're now into the transpersonal planets. So Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. These are much slower moving planets, and they are not visible from the naked eye. So they're kind of the newbie planets in the whole gang here. But these are really going to bring about these much deeper, slower changes. And Not everybody's going to be aware of these necessarily. It depends, because because they're transpersonal, they're hidden forces. They're not readily visible. That's not always true. Like if you have, one of these transiting your moon, especially, like you're going to be like, that is not invisible. I mean, it's going to bring issues up. So, I mean, it depends. It depends what kind of awareness you're working with. And that's been my experience. So Uranus usually brings in a sort of sudden change and some kind of awakening, something unexpected and maybe destabilizing.
Yeah, Uranus I think of as excitement or anxiety. It's, and those are two flip sides of the same coin as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, when we get into making the video about transits to personal planets, we'll have a lot more to say about these outer planets. In general, they take so long to move through a house that, yes, these planets might be moving through a particular house, but unless they're engaged with one of your personal planets, you're unlikely to be terribly aware of it in that area. But when it changes sign, like Pluto did, you're more apt to get that first initial blast of that energy in that house.
Yeah.
That it goes into.
Another thing I just want to touch on really quickly here is also, folks who are watching this, you're probably noticing, well, geez, there's Uranus and right next to it's Mercury. There is a connection. Sometimes the fast moving planet, i.e. Mercury, in this case at 24 Taurus, it might trigger something that starts to reveal the bigger change that the outer planet is bringing. So there's sort of a trigger effect. So I did want to mention that, because you might feel something, but if you look and you see that a trigger planet kind of revealed that, I think that's a really good video topic too, Laurie. But anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got, before too long, sometime within the next year, Jupiter is going to conjunct that Uranus, and that's going to be really important. And we'll be doing a video of that when the time comes. But yes, I'm really glad you brought that up, Jenny. These the quicker moving planets are going to spark things off on the slower moving planets.
Yeah, it's time and time again. So
yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean Neptune is even slower. So Uranus will go. It takes about 7-8 years to go through a house, something like that, or a sign. Neptune dramatically longer. That's a much bigger cycle, isn't it? It's 184 years, isn't it? Something like that, or 100 and something like that.
I think so. I think that's right. I think you're right. Uranus is an 84-year cycle. Yeah, I think Neptune's something like that, 180 something, and then Pluto is 248 years, something really crazy. But yeah, Neptune's pretty darn slow. Yeah. It's been in Pisces, which for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, and I always think Neptune just brings in that whole surrender. Like you can't do anything with it. It's kind of like it's a current, you just swim with the current. If you fight the current, you might drown. So don't fight the current. You just have to go with it. You have to just kind of go, okay, and be like, I was trying to swim to that other shore, but God knows where I'm going to end up now. And that's okay. You just kind of have to go, all right. So wherever Neptune does its long, slow thing, it's a long, slow process of dissolving ego concerns in whatever area of life we're talking about. And you just kind of have to go with it. It can be very challenging, but also kind of like, whatever, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah. You're gonna learn to dream. You're gonna learn to float with the stream, like you said. You're going to surrender. That's the energy of Neptune. So there's that. And then there's Pluto. Pluto recently changed sign back in March. Pluto changed sign. It's going to be doing a retrograde. It's going back into Capricorn very soon now, in a couple of days from when we're talking. Pluto's going to backtrack into Capricorn again. So you want to, those of you who are watching this, during the period of time that we are talking about it, Pluto's doing a little dance back and forth from Capricorn to Aquarius and back again. It's going to be doing that for a while now. And Pluto's a fascinating planet, and it moves so slow. Like I said earlier, it's like a 248-year cycle, I think. So none of us are going to live long enough to see a full cycle of Pluto, clearly, unless longevity changes rapidly. But Pluto's job Pluto's real job is to empower.
Mhm.
And the challenge is that Pluto is going to destroy whatever is in the way of necessary change in order to reach that empowerment.
Yeah.
So Pluto can just wipe things off the table. And again, this is one of the outer planets. If it's not directly impacting a personal planet of yours, you will feel it as it comes into a sign. You'll feel it in that area. But it's until it is really interacting with your personal planets, it's not as dramatic.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I was thinking Pluto pulverizes. That's a few because it does. It kind of has that. It carries that regenerative factor. And I think about like a wildfire comes in and burns everything to the ground, and it just wipes it out. And it's no longer what you think it doesn't look like what it used to be. It doesn't act like what it used to be. It isn't what it used to be. But then what happens is this new life comes in, and that's really what's going on with Pluto. So it's not, I mean, as mere mortals, Pluto is very powerful, and it brings in those forces that are just way beyond our control. But so the answer is, what do you do with it? You have to look and let yourself be transformed along with it. I mean, that's sort of the Pluto thing. So it's a very
And
yes, it actually does. Yeah,
isn't
sometimes.
that applicable,
Mhm.
given that I know you have Scorpio rising, and
Mhm.
this is really very applicable because of wildfires in your
Mhm. Yeah,
family's life. That it's
yeah,
so interesting how these things play out. And yeah, wherever Pluto has moved, there is that uh destruction in order for regeneration.
yeah.
So look for where that is in your own chart and really consider what the requirement for transformation is in the house that holds Aquarius in your chart. Huh.
Yeah,
It's
so
so
I mean,
interesting.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot to this little video because we've kind of covered the zodiac signs, we've covered the houses, we've covered the planets. But hopefully what you walk away with is the idea of this sort of game shift, this like total game changing thing when a planet moves into a new sign. And obviously there's a huge variation from the couple days of the moon to the 13, 14 years of Pluto or more it might spend, or even 20 years it'll spend. I mean, it's in a house. So just think about that spectrum, and then just think about in your own life, what is your chart? What are the houses being impacted? And just start noticing the different parts of your life that come into the forefront. So,
Yeah, and look at your chart. Where is Pluto right now? Where is Saturn? Where are these planets moving? Where are they teaching you and bringing your attention? It's a fascinating thing to track these. And it's not that hard to do. It's you can just learn this stuff and follow along. All right. Are
okay.
we done with this chart?
Yes, I think we are. I think we're done with the
Okay.
video.
Oh, this has been so fun, Jenny. Thank you for having this conversation, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lori, and thanks people for watching. So
All
we'll
right.
see you
Leave us
on.
comments. Let us know if you learned anything. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you. Bye.